Hello everyone and welcome back to another Arty Class hosted by Shopkeep Arty, the online shop platform used by artists, galleries, schools and communities to showcase and sell your art or online tuition, as well as printing your designs on items provided by our suppliers that are then delivered direct to your customers so that it's hassle-free for you to manage. If you're interested in hosting workshops, creating a virtual walk-around art gallery, or designing items with your art, our team are happy to discuss how to help, and you can contact us through our website or simply check out our YouTube channel. We've got various videos on there too. For those watching this Arty Class for the first time, they feature award-winning artists from around the world and are designed for all ages, providing a creative escape every week on a Tuesday at 2 o'clock. Just remember the T. On Thursdays, we host additional Arty classes and community chats for our patrons. So if you do enjoy it today, you can become our patron for as little as 20 pence, or that's about 25 cents a day, and not only feel great that you're helping to support our channel, but you receive extra Arty sessions throughout the month, so it can't be bad. We send an email every Saturday with highlights from the previous week, as well as a summary of the classes that are happening the following week. Alternatively, if you can't wait, you can visit our website and we've got everything you want to find there, and I'll just show you how easy it is to find that information. So you visit our website. Here it is. You click on Arty Classes at the top or in the menu, and then you scroll down and there you go. You can see Randy's there. You can go into our video archives. So we have two types of classes, a short 45-minute one and our workshops, which are 2 to 3 hours. And you can scroll down and see all the upcoming events that are happening over the next few months. And we've got, just draw your attention to a festive celebration. We've got a few celebrities. If you're in the UK, you'll know who Fee Glover and Joan Bakewell are, but we've got a few other celebrities that are going to be taking part in this festive virtual celebration. We've also got a Scottish minister who a few months ago did say that she was open to being featured on a portrait class. It's gone a little bit silent since I've asked her for a photo, but anyway, hopefully that is going to be happening soon. So hopefully that you'll be able to peruse and sign up for some upcoming Arty classes there if you're interested. So these free 45-minute paint-along Arty classes are designed to give you a great taster of the artist, but you can then join us for a proper 2 to 3 hour workshop where we walk through a complete painting from start to finish. It's a much more immersive experience, and you learn loads of tips and tricks from the artist to improve your art. It works out to just over £10 an hour, which is, I guess, about $12 an hour, which is amazing value. This week, we're welcoming back Randy Hale from Colorado, and you can check out his other classes and workshops on our website because he's worked with us for a few months now. Randy describes himself as a workshop instructor, signature member, juror, and has had the good fortune of conducting workshops for painters throughout the US. As always, Randy and I can't see or hear you. Ideally, type your question in the Q&A, which is at the bottom, and we'll get to it when ready. Or if you want to ask a question direct, you can press the little hand icon and I can see that and invite you in. If you're watching on YouTube, there is a bit of a delay, but you can type the message in there and I'm keeping my eye on it and I can then relay that question to Randy and put that question to him for you as well. We'll stop around halfway just to ask Randy to highlight his up and coming workshop that's going to be happening on the 17th of November. But enough chat. Let's hand over to the main act, so to speak, and say hello to Randy. Hello, Randy.
Hey, hello, John. Thanks for doing all the moderating. I really appreciate that.
No problem.
Today, what we're going to do is kind of a wonky still life of some goblets and some fruit and cheese in a bottle. But the real intent of this is to show you how to mix a lot of colors right on the paper and take a lot of water and a lot of paint and let these colors mingle together to get really juicy, fun colors that glow and are very luminous and reminiscent of glass and some of the things that we're going to see. John, if you want to switch over to my palette, I'm going to talk a little bit about my brushes.
Sure. Now, just before we do that, Randy, Anne's had her hand up for a while, so I'm just going to bring Anne in, Anne Wild. You might need to unmute Anne. There you go.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was clicking the wrong button. I just wanted to say hi before.
Oh, okay. Hello. Hope you enjoy.
Yes, I'm sure.
Okay.
But anyway, what I wanted to talk about is I've got 3 flats that I use a lot. I've got this one that's a Da Vinci. It's about 1.5 inches. I've got another one that's about 1 inch wide and one that's about 1/2 inch wide. And I like them because they're so versatile. They've got a nice crisp edge on them, and I can also use the corners of them. When you get them wet, they really hold a nice crisp edge. I'm going to use probably 2 rounds. I have a small one and a medium, just in case I need those, and then I've got a couple of Riggers. So I'm going to set these aside, and we'll start off with my medium-sized flat. And what I want to do is get plenty of color and water on my brush. So I'll get a little bit of water here in my mixing area, and I'm going to start with the bottle. I'm going to do a kind of a bottle green color. So I'm going to mix up a little bit of sap green, which is a pretty warm green, but I'll pick up a little bit of ultramarine, and that blue to the green really kind of balances the value. But if you look at the palette, you can see I'm really getting a nice rich mixture or charge on my brush of pigment and water. I'm going to swing over here now so you can see my drawing that I've got sketched here on my my board. And the bottle is going to be the dominant shape. It's going to be the darkest, and it's also probably the largest shape. But rather than painting the entire bottle the same color, I just want to put a few marks down on the paper and let that puddle of water sit there. I'm going to clean my brush and get another color that maybe is a little bit of a lighter green. Drop that in there in another place and leave some dry spots on the paper, and then let the water kind of touch these places and move together. I'm going to also get some warm color with a little bit of gamboge. And what happens when the water touches these, and I've got this board elevated just a little bit too high. So I'll take one of the rolls of tape out from underneath the board so that it has a chance to gently roll downhill and give me a nice smoothing out of these colors. And I'm just dropping in color into this really wet puddle of paint that's on my paper. And if you have a big puddle of water and paint on your board, you're going to find that the water will take the pigments and it'll move them back and forth into the different areas, and you'll get a mingling and mixture of these colors right on the paper. And if you can accomplish this, you're going to have a beautiful mixture when it dries, because it'll start glowing. Now I'm going to bring a little bit down the side, but I want to leave a little bit of white along this edge, because I'm going to come in with some background color and create a negative shape there, which would more or less kind of indicate the thickness of the glass. So I'm just bringing this down, and I'm not, I think one of the mistakes a lot of people make is they try to paint the entire bottle all in one big stroke. I'm dropping in different colors of intensity within these puddles and just letting the water kind of move it around itself. And as you get to the bottom of a bottle, everybody knows that when they make bottles, they have this little bubble at the bottom. I've always thought that was sort of a conspiracy to keep you from getting the full value of your bottle of whatever it is you're buying. But at any rate, I'm going to create just a little sort of a bubble there so that you can see, and I'll just leave a little negative shape in there so that it indicates what we're looking at. I'm going to drop in some sort of an apple green in there. It's a cadmium green light. I happen to be using a golden green, but you can see how it moves us from cools to warms all within these greens. And I'm going to also drop in a few places a little bit of gamboge in a few places just to warm it up and let these colors touch that wet area, so we start to see some mingling on the paper. I'm going to take my other brush, which is it's about I guess it's about a 3/4 inch flat. And I'm going to wick up a little bit of these puddles of water that are just sitting here. And I don't know if you can see on my paper, but I've left a few dry areas of white paper exposed on the bottle. And those are like reflections on the glass. And I don't want to touch those with any water, because anywhere you wet the surface of the paper, you're going to get paint moving through there. But if you leave it dry, it will remain dry, and water will not have the ability to flow through that. So now I've got part of my bottle done. I'm going to leave the neck of the lip of the bottle and the cork done until later. I'll come back to that. But I want to work with my cheese. I've got a big slice of cheese here. I'm going to take like a cool yellow and get the top of this, because it's got a little more light on it. And I don't need to have a lot of color here. I just want to get a little bit of light tone in that. And I'll then bring in a little bit of yellow ochre to break that up a little bit as we get closer to the edge. But I want to leave the far corner edge of the top of this piece of cheese kind of a light value of yellow. And we'll bring that down. And then as I start coming down the vertical surface of the cheese, I'm going to mix a little gamboge with my yellow ochre to get a darker color, and let that just come down around these strawberries that I have in the middle of the page. And we'll just drop this in. I'm going to try to drop in maybe a little bit of burnt sienna while it's wet, and I got to get it on my brush. There we go. And you can start to see how that just gives a very loose, wet shape. And we start to see the burnt sienna mixing with the gamboge, and it leaves a really nice, warm, mottled surface a little bit. I'm going to also bring in a little raw umber, which is a cooler color. It's a beige also, but it has a little bit of a cool cast to it. And I'm just dropping water now into this and letting it kind of move it around. So we've got a nice, gentle progression of color. And I'll go back to my lighter. I want to get a little more water on there. And now we've got a warmer base at the bottom of the cheese, and the water is running downhill with gravity. So it's starting to pool and bead up at the bottom. And I've lost a little bit of edge here in a few places, which is good. And I'm going to let that just sit for a minute. I'll throw a little bit of this warm over in the bottle while I'm waiting, just to let some of these other colors, the raw, the yellow ochre, kind of move around within those bottle glass colors. Drop in a little bit of dark, and we'll just let that kind of move around. Now, it's time to kind of let this settle down and just see what happens. For those of you who are painting along with me, this is a good time to just kind of sit back and step away from or kind of lean back away so you can see what's happening with your painting. I think a lot of people, they get in a rhythm and they start painting so fast that they don't stop. And you've got to step back a little bit from your painting and evaluate what's happening. And if you don't give yourself that opportunity, pretty soon you've got the painting finished and it's all midtones. So we want to make sure we've got enough darks. Now, this bottle is not going to have enough darks in it, because as this water evaporates and dries, it's going to dry 50% lighter. So I'm going to go back and get
now, Randy, Linda's asked, have you got much water in this?
Yeah, it's let me see if I can get down here a little lower. It's big puddles of water sitting on the surface. See that? And I'm going to just drop in some really dark Prussian blue. See if I can pull this back a little bit now so you can see it. But this, I'm on 300-pound paper, which is pretty heavy weight, and I can absorb a ton of water and not buckle. But having the darker pigment drop in now, while it's still wet, and letting it move around, it helps it really push the values where they tuck in behind the negative shapes down here at the bottom. And I want this to be fairly dark to give us some nice contrast. But I also want the water to move the pigment around and give us different values. I'm going to drop in a little bit of yellow ochre there along the warm side of this neck of the bottle. Maybe even drop in a little bit of water right into that neck and let it flow across the surface of this bottle. The more water you use with your pigment, the more interesting the shapes are going to be. You're going to have some really interesting mingling and mixing of colors. It's going to feel a lot more natural, the way it would if you look through the bottle glass. Let's see if I can straighten up my camera there for you. Okay, so we're going to let that sit for a minute and move to.
Aaron's asked, do you stretch your paper prior to?
You know, people ask that all the time. And if you're working on the thinner paper, like 140-pound paper, if that's on a block, it's already stretched. If you're working on a board, I would just clip it in the upper two corners because it's so thin that it absorbs a tremendous amount of water and it'll start buckling. I'm working on 300-pound paper, which is really stiff, and I tape it all the way around the edge, and it will not buckle. But if you try to tape 140-pound paper all the way around the edge, it has nowhere to grow when it starts absorbing all this water. So it starts buckling. And then you have big troughs running through the middle of your paper, and your water won't flow evenly across the surface. So you want to always allow your paper to expand naturally. And the reason I use the 300 is I don't have to mess with that. I just let it tape it down, and it stays pretty stable even when it's absorbing water.
Linda's asked, how come the water isn't running down if you've got it propped up a little bit and you've got loads of water on there?
Anywhere you have your paper damp, the water and the pigment will run through it. When water runs downhill and it hits a bead here and stops, it's because it's coming up against dry paper. It will not run across dry paper. If I were to wet the surface here, it would leak down and start running vertically down towards the bottom of the paper, wherever I dampened the paper. But all of this paper at the bottom and around the edges of the bottle, they're completely dry. So the paper, the pigment will not run through that area. It's a way to control where your shapes go. You can always pick up your board and roll it around a little bit and control where the water flows, but it won't run into your dry areas. So that's a real critical thing in watercolor painting. I'm going to clean some of this out of my palette. I'll swing over here and just show you. I'm going to take a little squirt bottle and just squirt some of this and take some tissue and wipe it off, because I want to get some really nice, thin, diluted blues for my goblets. And I don't want to have a lot of green in my goblet at this point. So I'll take this big brush and I'm going to add a little water there, make sure it's clean. And then I'll get a little bit of cobalt. And I might pick up a little bit of opera, which is like a hot pink, and just get a nice glaze, kind of a very delicate, thin wash. If I wanted a little cooler, I just add a little bit more cobalt and a little more water on one side. Now, as I come back over to my painting, I've got these two glasses that we see through. They're transparent. So I'm just going to just introduce a little bit of color across the rim of both. And then I'm going to come down one side. I'm going to pick up just a little bit of ultramarine and drop it right up in this area and let it run through that water. Take my other brush that's clean, this little 3/4 inch one, and I'm just going to soften the edge of that and of the brush stroke that I made coming down through that goblet. And by just touching it with a little bit drier ultramarine, it just adds a little bit of shadow in the glass. I'm going to rinse my brush and do a little bit of the same thing over on this side, and then clean my brush and drag a damp brush up against this goblet so that the back one is just a little cooler, and it has just, it more or less creates a negative shape for the one in front. And that helps push this one back and bring this one forward. Now, because I'm going to have some strawberries right here, I'm going to pick up a little touch of this pink, the hot pink, which is like a opera. And I'm going to drop a little bit of that in the lower bottom of these goblets, which are still very wet with the blue that I put on there. And let this pink just kind of run through that shape. I can even tip my board a little bit and let that water run. And now we've got what amounts to a little bit of a reflection. I'm going to drop a little bit of dark or blue into part of the stem, maybe a little bit over in here. And I'm going to add just a touch of yellow ochre. Whoops, that's too much. So we'll just pick some of that up very quickly with the tip of our brush, because our brush is clean and damp. And then I'm going to continue down with a little bit of cobalt that's very wet. It's pretty much diluted, but I'm going to leave a negative shape where it passes in front of the cheese, so that we go from a positive shape to a negative shape and then back to a positive shape. And I'm going to put a little darker blue down around part of the base of this goblet, and then push a clean bunch of water into that blue that I just dropped in there, and let the water carry the blue pigment back towards the front of the base of the goblet. I'm going to pick up a little bit more of the opera, and I'm going to drop a little bit of that into the bottom of the base, maybe a little bit into the blue, because right next to it are these two negative shapes that will be eventually some strawberries. And what I'm doing is I'm putting reflections in the glass before I actually paint the item, but it helps us see what we're going to do in a few minutes. So I'm going to get a little darker over on this side, and then just take the back end of my brush handle and kind of pull that around, because it's a big bead of water. I don't have to use a brush itself. I just use the handle to take this puddle and drag a little bit of it out of that into the dry white paper. I'm going to come up a little bit with a little bit of color, drop a little blue next to it, let it all just kind of run together. If it runs into your cheese, don't worry about it. It's going to be fine. I'm going to soften this so it just has a few hard edges and a couple of little bubbles of white that look like reflections. And the rest of it, I softened and let it all run together. I'm going to leave that for the moment and come back to my bottle. I don't know if you can see what's happening. I'm getting all these blooms, and I'm going to darken with a little bit of ultramarine and sap green and less water. And I'm going to drop in some really strong dark marks in a couple of spots here to punch this up. The paper's still damp, but I'm using some pretty dark pigment, and it's not real wet. So it allows me to drop in some darker, softer marks that just feather out. And I'll back up a little bit here so you can see this bottle.
Now Linda's asked, do you leave the pencil marks, or are they soluble, or do you erase them afterwards?
Oh, I just leave them. I don't worry about them. It kind of shows the structure sometimes. And if they are distracting, you can always erase them later. If you painted over them, they probably are not going to show up, or if it's a real light value, you will see them, but who cares? It's not a big deal. Come up through the bottle neck there. And I'm going to get a warmer bit of color on the neck, or the lip of the bottle. You can see I added a little bit of gamboge to that. And then I'm going to get a little bit of ultramarine that's drier for the, whoops, you can't see that. There you go. How's that look? And we'll get this dark right up around the rim or the lip of that bottle. And we'll let that dry.
And Sis has asked, how do you decide where to put the darks into the damp bottle?
Well, first of all, I have a light source that's coming this way. So I want this side of the bottle to be a little lighter, the opposite side to be a little darker. And you'll see from my goblet, I also have a little bit of a shadow side on this side. And this is a negative shape on the one in front. So that would indicate light is also coming from the same direction. I will create at the top of my strawberries a very light value, and then it'll get darker as it tucks in behind and beneath them in shadow. So all of these things will work together to create a single light source so that everything is consistent with light and shadow. And the light and shadow are really what defines volume. We're working on a two-dimensional shape or a two-dimensional surface, so we want to make sure that we've given the viewer plenty of information to determine that it's you know, where the light's coming from. Okay.
Carol's asked, could you accomplish similar results with wet on wet? And I would imagine not, because it would probably bleed a little bit too much.
It's going to bleed everywhere, and it's going to be very soft. Whereas I'm working on dry paper with the intention of letting a big puddle of water pick up several different pigment colors and mix and mingle together. And then as the water evaporates, it leaves all these particulates down in the tooth of the paper to kind of glow. If I were to try to paint really, you know, carefully with my brush, I'd be mashing up some of these pigments, and that would neutralize them, and they'd be a little grayer. They wouldn't be as vibrant. I had a little bit of water right in here on this cheese. I don't know if everybody can see that, but it created a bloom. And to me, the more of these kind of things you have, the more indicative it is of watercolor, because you're letting the water react with the pigment. And to me, those are beautiful marks that kind of communicate a looseness, which is kind of the hallmark of watercolor. So now, let me think here. I'm going to go ahead and probably put a little bit of value on the label of this bottle, and I'm going to get it fairly.
If you want, we could have the halfway break just now, if you wanted to do that, or should we just do this first and do that afterwards?
Let's go ahead and you take your break, and I'll just feather this away so it doesn't dry with a hard line on it.
Okay.
There we go.
So how are you enjoying it? Hope you're having a good time so far. I know that this 45 minutes to an hour goes really quickly. So we're going to stop just briefly and just ask Randy a little bit more to expand upon his workshop, which it's going to be 2 to 3 hours, and it's going to be in a few weeks' time on the 17th. Before I do that, if you are watching this on YouTube and you are enjoying it so far, please do hit the thumbs up, because it's really good for the YouTube algorithm. It lets more people know. I've come up with a little saying today. I said to Randy, I had a little surprise for him. Don't let Randy feel like a Banksy. Are you ready for this? Do you know what piece of art that's called? If anybody knows what it's called, it's very, very famous. It's a Banksy piece of art. But I thought, don't let Randy feel like a Banksy. Press the thumbs up button. So if anybody knows what that piece of art is called, let me know, because then it'll make sense why I said that. So let's just go over to Randy. Well, let's ask Randy a little bit more about what he plans to do in the workshop, which is going to be on Tuesday, the 17th of November. And it's going to be a later start as well for you in the US. You'll like the sound of that. It's going to be at 3:30 in the afternoon UK time, so an hour and a half later than the start of this one. So Randy, what are you focusing on for your workshop?
Well, I'm going to do a street scene, and everybody will be painting along, and we'll take it in stages. But when you do a landscape or a cityscape, a painting that doesn't have people in it feels kind of static. And if you can add crowds of people, it really gives a lot of energy to your painting. And you have to be careful you don't have everybody too much in focus all the way through the painting. You want to zero in on one part of the crowd, and then part of the crowds have to be a little less defined. And this is the one that I'm going to do in the workshop. And you can see that there's tons of tourists in Siena. I don't know how many of you have ever been to the big square there in Siena, but there's always tourists everywhere. And we're longing to get back to traveling. So I thought it would be fun to do this and show some of the big towering buildings with their shadows coming down. But that's not the center of interest. We just want to have some rich color with these surrounding buildings and get a little bit darker as we get down near the shoulders and heads of people, and then leave their heads and shoulders white negative shapes, and show how just a lot of legs and a lot of heads can translate into a whole crowd scene without having to put a lot of work into it. I think people get really worried when they think they have to paint a lot of people, and they start painting too carefully, and they paint really, it's a little bit too stiff. You want to keep it really loose and just an indication. Here's the photo reference I took when I was over there. And there are crowds in the shadows. And if you scroll back, John, to the painting, I played up the crowds quite a bit because the crowds are what set the atmosphere. And it's using these negative shapes that pop out of a dark background that make it a little more interesting.
And you've also supplied a value study and some other things as well that you'll be able to talk through in the workshop as well.
Yeah, and if you sign up for the workshop, you're going to have all this reference material. You can prepare your board, and you can get a light sketch of get the shapes of the people in place. But I've provided value studies, which also are like a roadmap to help you determine where your darks need to be, where your midtones need to be, and where your lightest values should be. So it's a nice tool to work from. I always try to have value studies, so I know exactly where I need to be dark, where my light is coming from, where my shadows will be falling. And that way I don't have to think so carefully when I'm painting. I can paint more intuitively and with less caution. I think a lot of people, when they're painting, they tend to try to think too much because they're not sure where the next brush stroke goes. And if you do value studies or you have a well thought out and planned painting, just in a black and white sketch, you already know where your dark shadows are going to be falling. You know where you need to preserve the whites of the paper, and you know where you can put some midtones. And it makes it, it allows you to paint a little more freely, and consequently your painting will be a lot looser and more spontaneous looking. So
brilliant. Brilliant. Well, I think it's going to be a really great workshop. So, and as I say, it's going to be Tuesday, 17th of November. So if you can make that date, then great. As I shared my screen there, if you go to Arty Classes on Shopkeep Arty, you can find the workshop, and it's got a link through to Randy's shop where you can purchase a ticket for the workshop. Anybody guessed what this Banksy piece of art is called? Shall I let you know? It's great. Nobody Likes Me. Nobody Likes Me is the title. So he's got no likes, no friends. No, I think it's genius. Anyway, so brilliant. So now sometimes at these Arty classes, we launch a hot ticket. And what that means is a ticket that gives you a bit of a discount on the upcoming workshop with the artist, but it's only open for a very specific amount of time. So we're going to do it today. It's going to give you a 5% discount off the ticket price, which is normally £35. And I'm going to post the special link to that hot ticket, both on YouTube and also in this chat as well, in the chat of this webinar. So you can use that. It's only going to be there for about an hour. So until about 3:30 UK time. So in precisely 57 minutes, if my maths are correct. So in about 57 minutes, it'll be there. So if you do want to join us on that date, it's a good opportunity to save a little bit of money. So I would highly recommend that you take advantage of that. So anyway, so let's go back to Randy's mixing of colors and making your paintings pop, as they say. Let's go back to the cheese. It's making me feel a bit hungry actually looking at the cheese.
I posted this on Instagram last night, and somebody responded and said, "Oh, I want one of those." Took me a minute to figure out she was talking about she wanted some wine and cheese, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm gonna work with the two shapes of the strawberries in the middle. I'm gonna start off with a very, very pale pink. And even though we all know the color of strawberries, we want to indicate that there's some light at the top of these. So we want to use a much lighter value. And I've got a big puddle of water going down on this. And it's just sitting there on top. But I'm going to clean my brush. I'm going to get some warm violet. It's Quinacridone Violet by Holbein, but anybody's warm violet will work. And I'm going to come in and create a dark mark around the other strawberry, so that it appears like it's tucking in behind it. And you can see what's happening with the water. It's creating these amazing little reactions. And clean my brush, just drop some water in between the two marks and let the colors run together. Then I'm going to pick up a little bit of, maybe a little bit of orange with some alizarin crimson and drop that in down at the bottom. And we'll just take a brush and pull some of that water very gently up towards the top of that strawberry. But I want the bottom of the strawberry to be really dark. And it's mostly water, so it's not going to remain dark. I've got to drop some more paint in right now while it's a big lake or puddle sitting on top of the paper. I'm going to take the same color and I'm going to come over on this side and drop even more in. And I'm going to pick up a little purple on this side just to get into the middle of that where that shadow will be. Clean my brush and just feather the top of those marks that I made with my brush because they're very wet, and just pushing a little bit of clean water into those dark, around the edges of those dark marks, leaves a very light negative shape across the top of the strawberry to represent where the light is hitting. I'm going to hit the bottom of this with some ultramarine blue just to give it a really cool color. Now, ultramarine has a lot of red in it, so it works nicely with this. And you can see, let me pull down, hopefully you can see how wet this is. It's really a lake. And I'm just going to soften the top edge of these brush marks. Look how that leaked in there. That's okay. When that happens, that just ties everything together. So I'll back up so you can see what's happening here as a whole. But now we've got this really nice dark shadow side of the strawberries. And we've got a lighter top to them where the light's on them. And they start to take on a dimensional feel, like they've got volume, they've got shape, they've got light and shadow. But I do want to, at this point, take my brush. It's not real wet. I've just kind of wiped off a lot of the excess water. It's still damp. And I'm just going to take this and drag it right across. I don't want to see the bottom edge of this strawberry. I'm going to come out a little bit in front of it as well, because these things have a shape to it. The light comes down. I'm going to come over the top of this guy, come in between them, and I'm going to go back and get a little bit more paint on my brush and drop it right in between these two goblets, drop it along the bottom edge of this wet part of the shadow, and then take a little bit of ultramarine and drop it right in here, in between them. And now we've got really nice loose shadow that connects the whole thing. While we're waiting for that to dry, I'm going to clean my brush and get a little bit of sap green and some ultramarine blue, maybe a little viridian, anything that has a cool green to it. And I'm just going to come right up through the middle of this cheese here with whatever's left of my negative shape that will represent the little green leaf on the top. I'm going to drop in some yellow ochre to touch with that that green, and see how that blends nicely. These colors are just going to kind of get in that wet shape, and they're all going to move around. Put a little bit right back in here, kind of between these guys. And you don't even have to paint anything that makes sense. It's just a little shape of green and we all know, because at the top of a strawberry, we're supposed to have a little bit of a leaf. It makes sense. Our brain will connect the dots. We'll know exactly what we're looking at. I'm going to drop a little bit more of the Quinacridone Violet in there. All right, so there's that. Now I'm going to put a little bit more of the violet, the warm violet, right up in this goblet up here. And then take my clean brush, I just rinsed it out, and I'm just going to soften the top edge with that little mark of darker red that's in the goblet, and just soften it. Pick up a little bit of the ultramarine that happens to be in my my palette, and I'm going to get a little bit darker right up inside parts of the lip of that goblet, and it sort of makes you feel like there's a little bit of depth in there. I'm going to come down and add a little bit on the inside of this just to suggest that there's depth there, and then just a little darker over the top of where it's dried now, to indicate some shadowing on the base of the stems and the goblet base. Just sort of anchors them a bit. I'm going to move away from that area and come back over here to my cork, clean my brush, Get a little bit of yellow ochre, raw umber, and maybe a little bit of burnt sienna, and just create a little bit of a warm tone, and then clean my brush and just soften the front edge of, or the right edge of that cork, and then use a burnt sienna to come in underneath it with a little dark on the inner side of that cork that goes down in the bottle. Clean my brush, pick up a little bit of this and drop it right into that green. So we feel like we're looking through the bottle at a warm tone there. Hopefully you can see that, where I just dropped a touch of a brush stroke in the green of the bottle, and it's nothing defined, but it just gives a sense of warmth there that might be a reflection of the cork inside that bottle. Now we've got the label left. So I'm going to take a little bit of the yellow ochre, which is basically a raw sienna, and I'm going to throw that on there with a little bit of water. I'm going to then pick up some yellow gamboge, which is really bright. Let that sit there, and then just take a kind of rinse my brush and let a wet brush kind of connect the dots between these guys. And as we get closer to the strawberry, I'm going to pick up just a real subtle amount of opera and let that mix with part of the label color, which is the yellow ochre. And it just sort of suggests a little bit of a warm tone within that warm label. And then I'm going to pick up a little bit of green, this sap green that we've got, and drop that right into the middle of this gamboge that we've got here. And it just, because it's a big lake full of water, or a puddle of water, it just moves around within that. And I want to bring just a little bit of orange over into this part, and we'll just drop some water next to it and let it just kind of flow. And it sort of puts a bit of a core shadow right through the middle of that label. And it's running downhill. You can see it's starting to bead up at the bottom. I'm going to let it run right into the glass and right across some of where the bubble is through the glass, so we get a warm tone there. While that's doing its thing, I'm going to get my big brush, which is this one, get it wet, clean. I'm going to clean my palette. You can see I've got a few colors all mixed on my palette there. I'm going to get rid of those. Got to get a squirt bottle that works. And it's just a misting bottle, but it helps me clean my palette so I can get a really clear, diluted glaze to put in the background. And I want this to be sort of the same cool colors as the goblets. And I'm just going to take my brush, add a little bit of water here, a little bit of cobalt blue, and then a little bit of the opera. So we get plenty of water. I'm going to push that over to one side and get a little cooler over here. So I've got two places. I got a cool and a little bit of warm, but I'm going to get a nice charge well mixed into my brush, bring it back over here, and I want to create just a nice little soft bit of background, almost like a wet and wet, but I've got so much water on my brush that, and the fact that my board is angled up a little bit, this water is going to bead up right along as it comes down to where it stops against the warm, I'm sorry, the dry paper, and it will look like it's tucking in behind a table, and it just gives us sort of a nice little dimension there to work with. And I'm going to come over to the other side. Let me move this over here so you can see it, and do the same thing. And this darker value is going to go right up against the goblet negative shape, so that it shows up. And then we'll do the same thing over here against the background of this cheese, and we'll get a little bit darker right up against that cheese so that it makes sense what we're looking at. And I'm going to clean my brush, and it's just wet, and I'm going to push it away from the edge of that cheese, and then probably get a little bit cooler, darker bit, and this is already wet, so this is like painting wet and wet against a dry edge. And I'm just defining this goblet a little bit, and then I'm allowing more water to get in this blank area here in the middle. So I get a gradation and a change in value going across the background. But it's very quick. It's not, I'm not overthinking it. I'm just kind of pouring this in here and creating these negative shapes around the goblets. I want to get a little bit more value in my blue right up against this goblet. And I've left a dry spot there on the goblet, so it should stay pretty loose. So I'm going to let this all run, get a little bit in here as well. And then I'm going to just turn my board and let it all run uphill and get a really nice, loose, runny quality to the background. This is literally a wet and wet background now. I just happen to have tint on my brush, and I'm going to retrieve a little bit of edge here. I'm not too worried about that. Looks like Randy got his knuckle in the painting down here in the front. So we'll just take a clean brush and we'll pick up those little marks that are in the foreground. And as soon as this is dry, I'll put the label on here, some printing with a Riga, but I'm also going to come back in now that my cork is dry with a little bit of a shadow on part of this cork. So it's just a little darker coming up one side there. And also a little bit of burnt umber on the underside there. Now we feel like we can actually feel light and shadow on that. And I'm going to take a 1-inch flat, put a little bit of warm tones in the foreground. We'll just kind of come across here with a real quick stroke and then let it dry brush. Add a little bit more warm violet to the burnt sienna. So we get a really nice progression of dark, and then maybe a little yellow ochre coming across here just to kind of anchor that down. And I'm going to add just a touch of ultramarine blue into this corner just to anchor it. But I can always take a little bit of a spray bottle, loosen that up, and clean my flat brush. And I'm going to drag just a little bit of water on my sharp edge of my brush right through this little dark mark. And it's going to loosen this up so nice and create some blooms that because my board has just a little bit of angle, it's going to eat into that dark pigment as it dries. It'll be really nice. So are we dry yet? No, I'm going to use my heat gun and dry this label real quickly so I can do a little Riga work on there. And then I'm going to also separate these strawberries just a little bit with some alizarin crimson. So I'm going to get a little bit of warmer color right in here to really separate that and brighten it up a little bit. And I'm just going to push water into the edges of that so it kind of feathers back towards the lighter edge. Now they have a little bit of brilliance to them. And I also have a very wet label, so I got to get that dry before I go and cut in around that. I think that's dry enough. I can take my a little bit of orange and gamboge, mix it with my burnt sienna, and I'm going to create a darker value on my label, clean my brush completely, and then just feather that back into the bottle so that that label is a little darker than the cheese behind it. It's definitely darker behind the strawberry. And I'm going to drop a little bit of water onto this wet area to let it just get mottled and have some texture to it. And as soon as that dries, we'll put a little interesting marks on there, maybe in Russian or something that we can't read, but it'll indicate that there's some brand labels on there. While we're waiting for that to dry, I'm going to use the same color that I did on the label and come in right underneath my cheese with a little bit of a shadow. Come right on across. It's just a nice warm against that that white back there, and it just really kind of pops. I'm going to take one of my riggers, probably a liner, and get some dark blue. And I'm going to come in right around part of this, the bottom of this goblet with just a little bit of a shadow, a little bit underneath the bottle, just to anchor it a little bit. I still haven't put my shadow on the bottle. I've got to do that. So we'll take a brush and get some blue-green. And I'm just going to come across here and lose the bottom edge of this just slightly. Feather that right on up into the bottle. And let that green mix with the strawberry reds so we lose those bottom edges. Got to dry this and we're going to be almost finished. I'm going to get a little bit of alizarin crimson and a little bit of the greens, but we'll start with the alizarin crimson and a little bit of the warm violet color.
Randy, could you move your camera over to the left just slightly, or the board over to the right? Yeah, that's it. Perfect. It was just missing the left edge.
And I'm going to just kind of indicate a few little things that might be construed as righty. Get a little bit of the green on here, and we'll just throw some marks on there that, and then I'm just going to take a little bit of water on one of my rounds and smear that a little bit. That round is not working. A little fun fact, I started using a heat gun because it's quieter and I'm able to talk over it. But it gets so hot that when I set it down, if I touch one of my brushes, I melt the bristles on my brush. I discovered that the other day. I picked up a brush and I wondered, what is this goobery thing on here? And I realized that I had literally just melted the edge of the flat brush and I had to throw it away. So be careful if you do that. But I just wanted to try to get this with a bit of a rigor. It tends to work a little better. So we don't really see what's on that label. It just, there's something that obviously tells us it's a label. And I might take, this is actually pretty dry. So I'm going to take a little bit of cobalt and a little bit of the green. No, not green. I'm going to use cobalt and the pink, but a little darker version of it. And I might just come down with a few little loose lines coming through here. And then maybe get some of that green on here, and we'll just do a little bit of just a few little fun little things there that kind of suggest that there's a few other little shapes. But I think that's it. We've got a nice little fun loose painting, and we've got a little bit of tone in the background that holds some of these edges. I could take a little bit of the cooler color and just create a little more of a negative shape right in here with a big puddle of water, and then just soften it. And I'm going to drop just a touch of green into that wet shape to suggest that it might be picking up a little bit of the bottle over here as a color. So we've got some pinks from the strawberries, we got some greens from the bottle, and we got the blues from the background, all reflected in these empty goblets. The one thing we're missing is what's in the goblets. So let's put something in the goblets. Let's get a little bit of a kind of a pink, maybe it's a rosé, who knows? We'll just kind of throw something across there.
Now, while you're doing that, Randy, because I'm just conscious of the time, if you want me to pass on any thanks to Randy, by all means, write that in the Q&A or on YouTube, because I'll be coming to that fairly shortly. Sayani on YouTube has said, what brand and size of Riga do you use?
Oh, I'm using a Sterling Edwards rigger. It's about I think it's a 6. It's a pretty long one and pretty flexible. Yeah. But I also have a liner for much more fine work, and it's I don't know what, it's a Princeton. It's an American brush. It's a number 4. So I've got 2 different sizes, and I use them about equally. The bigger one does the broader strokes, like these little lines around the bottle. They're great for signing things. The liner is a little bit more detailed work, but it's like I said, I use them both equally, and neither one of them are very expensive. And I think that this liner that I've got, the smaller one, is on its last legs. I'm probably going to have to go buy another one because they wear out. I'm pretty hard on my brushes. I use my brushes pretty aggressively. So you'll find that occasionally if a brush kind of starts losing its point or its edge, it might be time to replace it. But they do last quite a while.
Sorry, Anne's asked, where is the hot ticket? So Anne, if you go into the chat, which is at the bottom, so just press the screen. I don't know what you're watching this on. And there's a chat feature, just do that. And the link is there. So you can then click on the link. It'll open up your internet browser on the right page. And that's where you can then purchase the hot ticket with the discount. So hopefully you can see that. Now, I've got a couple of important things to say to you. So first of all, thank you very much for attending. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'll go back to the painting in a minute. But first of all, we'd love to see what you've created. That would be great, because it's always good to see what everybody else's interpretation is. And also Randy can comment on your art as well. So we've created a post for this class on Facebook. So simply search Shopkeep Arty on Facebook and you should then find it. And if you can then upload a photo of your painting to that, then we can all see it. Also, if you want a direct link to that post, you can see that in the description in YouTube below, so you can click on that, or on our website as well. So please do share your art, and it's always great to see what everybody's come up with. So, and I'm sure Randy would be very interested to see that too. Secondly, make sure that you click on the link of the hot ticket before I finish this session, because if you are interested in taking part with Randy's workshop, and it has been a really great session, so hopefully you will join us, because he's a great teacher. Do by all means click on that link before I finish this, because otherwise, as soon as I finish it, it'll disappear. So please do that. Brilliant. Let me go back to the picture. So really fantastic and excellently well timed there, Randy, because it's pretty much the hour on the dot there. So that was fantastic on finishing that. But it's so effective, isn't it? It's got a real life and vitality to it.
The more water you use, the better the paint will flow. If you don't have enough water on your brush strokes will be too dry, and they'll look too stilted and too stiff. So the water is what gives it the looseness and the fluidity that we look for in watercolor. And purposely, I did kind of a wonky still life here, just to enhance the looseness of it. So it's a fun little subject, a good way to paint, and create some great little entertaining artwork for everybody.
Exactly. And it'll be a really interesting workshop to focus on the crowds, and it's obviously a much bigger session because it's much more detailed, isn't there? So but that'll be a really interesting
and we'll have a little bit more time, and in the workshop we'll take it in stages. We won't do the whole painting all the way through.
I know it's always a bit of a rush on these 45-minute things, isn't it? So having to get through. But let me pass on some thanks first of all. So Linda, excellent teaching. Karen, absolutely fantastic, thank you, can't wait for the workshop. Carol Ann, thank you, Randy, very interesting workshop. Victoria, very inspiring. I think it might be more difficult to achieve than it looks, possibly, certainly would be for me anyway. Lovely, confident painting from Claire. I aspire not to worry about cauliflowers and to paint more freely. Thank you for a great workshop. Harvey Rudkin, thank you for an excellent demo. Look forward to the bigger session. Norma, lovely study, Randy. Thanks so much. Really love your style, where you enjoy using nice, bold colours. So that's great. Donna, thanks, Randy. Beautiful picture, and you came across great. Linda, thanks. It was great. Susan, thanks, Randy. Inspirational work. What confidence. Louise, couldn't make it work. Now, I would imagine, Louise, you're probably talking about the link. So if you want the link, if you message me, you've got our email address anyway, and I can send you the link after this session anyway. Linda, is the drawing to be done before the workshop? So so the outline, because that would speed up the process.
You'll have all that information on the website.
Yes.
And you print it and then have something to work from to prepare and be ready before we start, so that you've got a drawing, you've got a value study, and you're pretty well prepped on the direction we're going to go. And then I'll take you through step by step how we apply the paint and the values.
Yeah, perfect. Liz says, fab demo. Thank you. Patricia Lowe, this is my first workshop, which is excellent. Thanks very much. Well, Patricia, I'm afraid you've missed so many other great workshops as well. So please do pop onto our website and have a look, because we've got all the video links there as well. So you can look at all the previous ones as well. So that would be really, really useful for you. Patricia, loved it. Wished I could keep up. But the other great thing, Patricia, you can watch it on YouTube afterwards. So that's another great advantage. Frank, thanks, Randy. Great instruction. Silka, my mom has taken classes with you in person and absolutely raves about your classes. Just knew it would be worth staying up late here in Thailand to tune in. So,
she is.
yeah, that's Silka in Thailand. So hang on, I know a bit of Thai. Sawadee Cup. There we go. That's my bit of Thai. And Elaine Day, thank you, loved it. Shirley, many thanks, have signed up. Patricia, yes, thanks. We'll take more classes. Well done, Patricia. Whew. And haven't even got to the YouTube ones yet. So I think we're at the end. But anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for joining this one. It's been a great. It's always a bit manic in these Arty classes because it's so much. But
by the way, John.
Yes.
If anybody wants to go to my website, it's Hale Gallery.
Hale Gallery. Okay.
H-A-L-E. They could sign up for my newsletter and be aware of all future Shopkeep Arty things that are coming up, as well as a lot of tips that I give in my monthly newsletter where I have a little article. So, or they can sign up for Randy Hale Fine Art. That'll take you to the same place. That goes to my website. But on my website, there's a place to sign up for my newsletter if you're interested in following things that I'm doing. And I always try to have a useful little tips and an article about something that's useful in painting. So
perfect.
Need to be popular.
Thank you. So until next time, thank you for joining us. And if I'm going to be seeing you, because I'm starting a workshop in about 28 minutes with Liz Chatterton, and that's going to be interesting. What are we doing there? Let's see if I can do a bit of magic. Here we go. We're going to be doing, hang on, wrong side. Penguins. We're going to be painting king penguins. So that's going to be quite interesting. So with Liz in about 28 minutes. So if you're going to be joining me there, I look forward to seeing you then. So until next time, and we've actually got someone in Boston, Sarah Roche. She was the founder of the Botanical Society, Watercolour Society in Boston, and she's joining us this Thursday for a workshop where we're just going to be painting leaves, but she does it in such intricate detail. She did a rose some months ago and it was fantastic. So looking forward to that too. So until then, it's bye-bye from me, and obviously goodbye and thank you so much to Randy.